My name is Jonna Shook. I am a board certified and Connecticut licensed music therapist. I am the director of services for Infinity Music Therapy Services. We have our main clinic in Southington, Connecticut, but we provide in-home, in-school, in-facility services throughout the entire state of Connecticut and also some services on the national level. When it comes to IEP specifically, yes, I'm a professional in the field, but I have a 12-year-old son who is on the autism spectrum with ADHD and 4 different speech disorders. So I've sat on both sides of the table trying to navigate things as a professional advocating for my families, but also navigating the alphabet soup that is IEPs and feeling very alone and isolated at PPTs, to be perfectly honest, with the number of things they throw at us. So my goal for us today is to give you kind of a crash course on what is and is not music therapy, and then how does that play into the Individual Disabilities Education Act, IDEA, so that federal law that oversees all of our individualized education plans, IEPs, and how we can get music therapy potentially on the IEP. So there is, like I said, there's a lot of alphabet soup. I'm going to try to give you the acronym and the words every time we come across it today, as it can get pretty convoluted. I'm going to try to watch the chat as well as I'm going. But if something is not getting answered, I will, by all means, unmute yourself and interrupt me if you got it. If you got like a burning question, I'd rather you guys got everything out of this presentation than me talk at you for the next hour. And then I can't tell, it looks like there might be more people in the waiting room, but if I click on it, it keeps giving me weird messages. So I don't know, I've got a little red dot saying people might be waiting. All right, so what is music therapy? Okay, so in a nutshell, it is a data-based allied healthcare profession where we use music and music-based interventions to target non-musical goals. So that's a lot of frou-frou language to basically say everything we do is rooted in research. Yes, I get to play guitar and drum with my clients, and I work with kids and adults. And from an outside perspective, it looks like we're jamming. And for some people, they're like, it looks like a glorified hippie session almost, because we're sitting there singing some songs and jamming out on instruments. But everything that we are doing is rooted in research. It's rooted in how the brain processes music, how music is tied into developmental milestones, and how we use music to work on non-music skills like communication, attention to task, our ability to self-regulate, motor functioning, you name it. And music is the only sensory stimuli that's processed on both hemispheres of the brain. So when we think about speech and language, it's a tiny little portion of our brain. Music highlights multiple areas when we are actively engaged in it. Now, with it, music therapy, we don't need, as a client, as someone who's participating in it, they do not need to have music skills. It's not like they need to know how to play an instrument in order to participate in music therapy. That is part of the skill set of a music therapist, is knowing how to adapt music and instruments to make them accessible to people of all ages and abilities. So we do have clients that are non-speaking. I have clients who have very limited use over their arms or their legs, and they still participate in music because music is processed on both hemispheres of the brain. So when we look at this chart, look at brain processes, music impacts our motor functioning. You think about it, everybody's walking down the street together. You ever notice everyone's feet eventually line up and everyone's feet start hitting the pavement at the same exact time? That's because our brain likes to entrain to rhythm, and we don't like the sloppy sound of everyone's feet hitting the pavement at different times. And so we use that brain function in music therapy to work on things like motor coordination, hand-eye coordination, even gait rehabilitation, working with people to walk and walk more fluidly. When we look at our prefrontal cortex, music helps control behavior, expression, and decision-making. Think about music making you feel happy or music making you feel sad. It's that emotional outlet. So we've got this prefrontal cortex involved also with our hippocampus, which is in memories. And we think about how music makes you feel at different times. Or I know for me, I have those jam out songs where I get in the car and I can just sing top of my lungs and I feel good, or my boohoo, I'm gonna cry it out songs. That is an inherent human function. So for individuals who need a different way to process emotions, maybe don't know how to put words to how they're feeling, or for our itty bitties where they've got really big emotions and really tiny bodies, the application of music can help provide a positive emotional outlet. And we might do this through improvisation or songwriting, lyric analysis. When we look at sensory processing, because music is a multi-sensory element to our world and our community, music can be used to help with things like sensory regulation. As music therapists, we watch the timbre of instruments, the key that songs are in, how instruments are shaped, even the way they look. So I might use different instruments in order to stimulate somebody visually or decrease the level of auditory input. And for some of my kiddos, especially, they might go to a lot of other environments and have those noise cancellation headphones on. And in music therapy, they come off because music therapists are equipped on how we organize sound in silence in order to meet the needs of our clients. There is not just one music that we use or one type of instrument that we use. It is a combination of a bunch of different things in order to meet our clients where they are at with their sensory needs, their cognitive needs, their music preferences, and so many other things. So this is a quick little video. I just want to show you, this is my nephew, Amari. He's about 5 now in this video. He's a little over a year. But when we look at music and the human experience, music is tied into our developmental milestones. We start responding to music in utero from around 24 to 26 weeks gestation. We'll start to respond to sounds outside of the womb. And when we look at developmental milestones, music helps produce speech. It helps organize motor functioning. It helps organize the way we relate to ourselves in the world. And it is tied very much into every piece of our development. When we look at music as part of society and as part of the human existence, like our hearts beat in rhythm. If we lose that rhythm, we have arrhythmia. We sleep in rhythm. If we don't sleep in rhythm, we have insomnia. Hello, all of my parents of kids with disabilities, all of us that are like insomnia, because the research the 17th doctor at 2 o'clock in the morning. But we look at our bodies are musical and they're rhythmic, and children at a very young age are responsive to music. So this video shows a little bit about a child who is non-speaking, barely babbling, and already how music can help work on building some of the foundations for speech and language.
Clap, clap, clap your hands. You do clap, clap. Clap your hands together. Clap, clap. You do clap. Clap, clap, clap your hands. Clap your hands together. La 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 la. La 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 la. La 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 la. You get shy?
So when we look at, our mirror neurons, music provides multiple opportunities for the brain to focus and engage. So often our kids, it looks like they're not paying attention to what's going on. Maybe they're, walking around the room. It seems like they're aimlessly like moving. And then later on, we hear them humming something that they heard before. Or so many times I get a referral for somebody and they say, my child is non-speaking, but they'll sing. It's because although our brain is sucking up that information and spitting it back out, because there's multiple opportunities for the brain to hook onto music, which is atypical when them using just traditional speech. All right, so who is a music therapist? Because it's not just anybody, it's not a speech therapist who plays guitar or a special educator who sings. Music therapy is considered a specialization within healthcare. So in order to practice music therapy, it does require a minimum of a bachelor's degree or what's considered an equivalency degree in music therapy. So it's an actual degree program. You can get all the way up to your doctorate in it. And what that training includes is all of your music. So you're arranging, conducting, composing, all of your psychology. So looking at mental health disorders, childhood development, and then the therapy side of things. So assessment, data, documentation, and then music therapy. How the brain processes music and how do we use music to get there. The degree is very intense. It includes clinical proficiency in guitar, voice, and piano minimum. Most music therapists play many more instruments than that. It has that built-in minor because it is so intensive. So many music therapists do not have a minor. I graduated with a degree in music therapy and a double major in psychology. So you will see that sometimes. And then they have to complete 1,200 clinical training hours as a music therapist. So Infinity Music Therapy Services, we are a national training site for music therapists. So I will take practicum students and interns, and they get trained up on the clinical applications of music under a board certified music therapist. And then after completing all of these things, we are eligible to sit for our national board certification exam, which upon passing, we can earn the credentials MT-BC, Music Therapist Board Certified. And in some states like Connecticut, we also have licensure requirements. Once you are board certified and licensed, however, you have to get 100 continuing education credits every 5 years in order to maintain your board certification. There is a lot of science that goes into music therapy, and it is possible for somebody who is not a clinically trained music therapist to do harm if they are using music incorrectly. So we always want to make sure that we are, when we're working with somebody who's saying there's a music therapist, that they are board certified and that they are licensed. So they are getting you're getting the full quality of services and not having something that's not the most appropriate. So who can receive music therapy? Again, like my practice, I'm the only perinatal music therapist in Connecticut. So I actually start doing prenatal work and helping individuals during labor and delivery using music as what's called an audio analgesic or pain management tool. So my clients who use music therapy since childbirth don't typically have any pain management like medications or interventions during labor and delivery. Music is enough to block the pain. Our oldest at the practice is 103. So we do serve the wide range of individuals. When we talk specifically about school age children, we work very frequently with autism. Autistic children are one of the top populations to receive music therapy because their brains are wired for music. There's research that actually shows that the vast majority, if not all, autistic individuals have perfect pitch, which is why some of our kiddos go nuts when they hear music, is because it's slightly off or the tonality is not where it's supposed to be, and they can hear it at a way that the rest of us don't. So they tend to have gifts in music, and the ones that aren't showing perfect pitch, it's usually due to some kind of sensory processing need. We also work frequently with children with Down syndrome. We're pretty active with DS ACT. And then we work with a number of kids with emotional and behavioral needs, whether that be anxiety, depression, oppositional defiant disorder, individuals who have experienced trauma or some kind of loss. And then we do work with individuals who have some kind of hearing or visual loss. So we really do serve the entire gamut when it comes to working with children and adults. And we do have many people that have dual diagnoses, such as autism and apraxia of speech. And so we're able to look at that from 2 levels in order to work toward our skills. Now, regardless of these different diagnoses that we serve as music therapists, our goal is to work with the needs of the individual while we take into account what the diagnosis is, because like with Down syndrome, that lets us know that it takes twice as much vocal energy to produce any kind of sound. So we watch for vocal fatigue. We build our sessions in accordance with the needs of the individual, their strengths, where they want to grow, their music preferences, their interests, and we custom build to them. This is not a boxed approach like you might see with Music Together. Everything is custom designed, and we might use music that they are familiar with, as well as writing songs right in the moment with them. So when we look at addressing different skill areas in music therapy, I've mentioned a bunch of these. I do want to point out social skills. When we look at social skill development, the difficulties that we sometimes see with our kids with regards to sharing materials or perspective taking, things like that, is usually related to some sort of self-regulation, anxiety that they are handling, or a cognitive issue. So social skills tend to be secondary. So when we really address the core root of what's going on using music-based interventions, we start seeing some of these social skills, as we often refer to them, start to emerge. So we think about kids who might have difficulty sharing materials. Think about the anxiety that's, I passed the drum off to somebody. When am I going to get it back? I wasn't ready to lose my turn. So there's that emotional side of things that we need to address and find some coping strategies to help them build some of those social skills. Now on IEPs, and we'll get to this a little bit more in a bit, you might see any of these skill areas and then some based upon the needs of the child. And so within music therapy, we may have multiple goals. We might be working on speech and language while working on attention to task and self-regulation, or we might really tailor services to maybe just one of those skill areas. All right. So within music therapy sessions, when we are working privately, we have a lot more freedom to do what we need to do. Within the school districts, it all has to be educationally based. It has to work toward the skill areas needed to access the general education environment. However, you might see a variety of things being used. So therapeutic instrument play is one that's very popular. We might be playing drums or shakers, playing guitar. I have instruments called quack sticks. You literally shake them and it sounds like a duck quacking. They're absolutely phenomenal. So we might be playing a variety of instruments. We think about sitting at the piano, that we're working on our finger dexterity, our core stability, and potentially working from moving our head left to right. If we are playing on the drums, potentially we're working on our grasp patterns. We're working on bilateral coordination. We're working on grading of force. We're working on active listening skills. So we're really choosing instruments, including the size, weight, color, and a number of other factors based upon the needs of the person. For example, I work frequently with children with cortical visual impairment. It is often a missed disorder, and there are specific protocols, or the brain cannot interpret what the eye is seeing. And so oftentimes we'll do sessions in the dark using glowing and lit instruments to give them the access to the music by actually highlighting what they can see and helping them build their visual acuity. And so we've had kids, if you have a child who's diagnosed with CVI, we've had children in our caseload that have moved through the stages of CVI using the combination of music and color in order to work through their sessions. When we look at therapeutic singing exercises, this can be things like filling in the blank at the end of the word. Our brain likes to not have things be left unresolved. So we think about, like, a kiddo song, Old MacDonald, and I sing, Old MacDonald had a farm, E-I-E-I. And like your skin almost starts to crawl because that O is not there. The brain wants to fill in words, and specifically for younger children or individuals who are delayed in their developmental milestones, we process high notes to low notes first. So we will manipulate melody lines in order to give them access to that word retrieval. We'll also just do things like melodic chanting to work on building some of, hey, I'm glad. Althea wrote, those are my son's first words. So when we look at doing some melodic chanting, maybe we're helping somebody who's babbling work on their full repertoire. Or I have an individual who's in their mid-20s, and goodness, this guy wants to talk. And so we are working on therapeutic exercises using rhythm and melody to help him organize the motor pattern to get the speech out, because he does have that apraxia on top of autism. And so we really start pulling out the different sounds and finding songs that focus on the sounds he has to build toward the sounds he wants. So there's a lot of different things that we might utilize based upon what we're working on. So I've got a couple of clips. My son is almost 13 now. Like I mentioned before, he's on the autism spectrum. He has ADHD. He does have 4 different speech disorders, and he did not really start talking until around the age of 5 or 6. And he is a Gestalt language processor. So when we look at music therapy and Gestalt language, they fit so nicely together because music is Gestalts, right? It's these little scripts we can apply everywhere. So this is him in one of his earlier music therapy sessions. And what you're going to hear is some of his imitation of the sounds, because music now is serving as the cue. At this time, outside of music therapy, he was not speaking.
I like on my I like put the on the put the on my don't forget the.
All right, so you put the hot dogs on my pizza. Don't forget the extra cheese, but we've got all that melody to help start phrasing, okay? This is him a bit older working on emotional literacy skills. My son can explode. He has very poor frustration tolerance, but he is an amazing reader. So we've got the combination of reading and music to help him work on some of his emotional awareness and building some of those skills. To just give you perspective, my son's hair is really long here. He was like a 2-person restraint in order to even come at him to try to get a haircut. And now because of music therapy and working on sensory regulation, he can sit and do it all day long and not have any concerns.
Where's the sad face? There. There, you got it. Can you show me a sad face? I'm okay. But I prefer it just like my engine running high and I'm feeling mad. My engine's running high and I'm feeling mad. Where's the mad face? There it is. Yeah, you're gonna giggle while it's mad. Mad face. Can you show me a mad face? Don't laugh when we're mad. Yeah, we don't laugh when we're mad. What do we do when we're mad? Yeah, do you yell when you're mad? But I prefer it just right. So I'm A-okay, and I'm feeling calm.
Okay, so we can see, like, you hear the babbling, and then as soon as we apply the music cues, we've got more language. The gap between that video and this one is about 3.5 years. My son still does use scripts to communicate at times. However, you can hear the drastic difference. And my son at this time did not have as a severe stutter as he does now. But you're going to see him pat his knee in order to organize himself to reduce the stutter as soon as he starts singing.
But he stepped in a big bucket of water.
He soaked up in a big bucket of water.
And all the brown and red, blue washed off.
Pete's shoes were white, but now they were wet.
Does he worry?
Goodness, no.
He keeps on singing his song.
Yeah. I love my wet shoes. 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 I love my wet shoes.
But
So, like, really big difference in speech and language. I will tell you, I get those little Facebook memories that pop up, and it's like, I just want to have a conversation with my kid. And now I'm sitting here, with, my support groups going, my kid told me off again. So looking at, the difference for him, and I'm going to talk about IEEs here in a bit, independent educational evaluations. But someone had asked in the chat, like, how did I get the speech disorders diagnosed? Because heaven knows the school districts don't always do what they're supposed to do in order to really nail down what's going on. I had multiple requests for IEEs and ended up with a fluency specialist out of DC that's what they do. They specifically work on fluency disorders, and we're able to pinpoint and nail down that not only does he have these different speech disorders, but also that his speech and language profile is upside down, that he speaks more than what he understands, which throws everybody for a loop. So we're going to take a look now, music therapy in the IEP, and many of these things you can apply to other avenues of trying to get services in your school district. Obviously, music therapy is my bread and butter. It's what I do. However, I am here to answer questions. I am one of those parents that the districts don't necessarily like at PPT. I have done state complaints. I have done human rights violation complaints. I have gone all the way to the initial stages of due process before getting them to agree to things at mediation, and doing it within the confines of what is required under the law and what my son should have been receiving the entire time. So, as we know, IDEA, Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, is full of alphabet soup. It's lots of acronyms. And I don't know about you guys, but sitting at the table, it's usually, hey, mom, what do you think about X, Y, and Z? Followed by a whole list of acronyms that I have to try to follow to pay attention to. So one of the things as you're going through this process is if they say things you do not understand, stop them dead in their tracks. Make them spell it out to you, because it is another language. And a lot of times, unfortunately, having sat on both sides of the table, districts will often count on our ignorance or on overwhelming us. And we don't want them to be able to do that when we are a full member of that team. So here are some of the basic acronyms you're going to hear as you go through this process. So the first one we're usually familiar with, IEP, Individualized Education Plan. The thing I do want to point out to you is that word individualized. And ESY, Extended School Year, is a good place where that IEP is not followed. My son is in inclusion 5 days a week during the regular school year, and every year it seems they want to stick him in self-contained for ESY. That is not an individualized education plan. He requires inclusion, and every year now I win and I get them to send him to camp because he needs access to non-disabled peers in order to make gains in speech and language and a lot of his other areas. PPT, Planning and Placement Team, we're usually familiar with that. As parents, we are part of that PPT. And that includes during the summer as well, even if there is a substitute team in place. Now, the evaluation we're going to talk a lot about today is called the SEMTAP. That's the Special Education Music Therapy Assessment Process. And we're going to boil in to IEEs, which is Independent Educational Evaluation. Joanna just asked, have you had private health insurance cover music therapy for a young adult with Down syndrome who is no longer in school? So Connecticut is so behind the ball when it comes to health insurance. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Other states, they will have, like, I have a colleague with 80% of their coverage, or 80% of their clients are being covered by insurance. Connecticut, we're not there yet. However, what I would advise is you're going to call your insurance company and say, is music therapy covered under my plan? And if they say no, you say, I want to know where it is in writing that it's excluded under my plan. If they say, yes, it's covered, then you're going to say, great, I'd like to know where it is in writing that it is covered by my plan. Licensure for music therapists just was passed in April of this year, and I am watching the trickle-down effect to see if we're going to get insurance to reimburse. I'm actually working with somebody to see if Infinity can get paneled with insurance now that we have licensure. But there are other avenues to go about while waiting on the health insurance piece. Like, we can take HSA and FSA cards without any difficulty. And I do know other states where they're able to take, like Connecticut's Blue Cross Blue Shield without any issues, but in state of Connecticut, we're having difficulty getting them to return our phone calls. So that's kind of that in a nutshell, and we definitely can talk more about that later on too. All right, so looking at our acronym list, least restrictive environment, so LRE. We do have in Connecticut what's called the LRE checklist. So if a child is going to get removed from the general education setting for more than 60% of their time, then they have to fill out what's called the LRE checklist and explain that it is the least restrictive assistance environment, and that they've provided all the potential supports that they can. We want to look at FAPE, so free and appropriate public education. This word appropriate is what gets me all the time. I guess free and public education, like those that like we can standardize that. We know what that means. Appropriate, we're looking at through evaluations and what the child can do and what they potentially will be able to do. So this is where we get a lot of questions for evaluations. RTI is response to intervention. We're going to talk more in depth about that, but I'm going to guess many of you have heard it and not heard it called the RTI. They sugarcoat it and say something else to you like, oh, we're going to try this and we'll see how it works. So we'll talk more about that. And PWN is prior written notice. So this is any changes to the IEP. We need to be provided advance notice of it. Okay. So when we look at IDEA, that's the law that's going to govern special education services. There are 4 main components. When we look at IDEA for special education, we are looking at Part B. If you had a child in birth to 3 services, that is Part C. And fun fact, music therapy can be covered under birth to 3 services, although the state of Connecticut is very confused about that. And I just got like 2 more kids covered under that by navigating that. Now, there are 6 main elements of IDEA that you've seen in different pieces. So we have the IEP, which is a legal document. So when you get your IEP, you always want to be taking a look at that and making sure that whatever you discussed at PPT is actually recorded in that document. And if it's not, you want to put it in writing what the amendments should be. Again, FAPE, so free and appropriate public education. LRE, least restrictive environment. Appropriate evaluations. Parent and teacher participation, and procedural safeguards. At all PPTs in the state of Connecticut, they are required to give you what your procedural safeguards are, and every single district now has to read a paragraph at the beginning of your PPT about your rights. If they are not doing it, they are operating their PPT illegally. So that was a whole memo that went out to all of the districts in Connecticut. It is a requirement. So looking at getting music therapy on the IEP. First, I'm going to say not all students require music therapy, just like not all students require speech therapy or occupational therapy. So this IEE, or independent educational evaluation, is the process to determine whether or not a child requires a service. Now, an IEE can be requested if a district hasn't provided the evaluation as of yet, or you disagree with an evaluation. And oftentimes I will see districts say to parents, oh, we didn't evaluate for music therapy, so you can't ask for an IEE. And that's not what it is. There's actually a memo from the state of Connecticut, I believe it was released in 2016, that says parents can request an IEE if the evaluation was not provided or if they disagree with the findings. Though the paragraph regarding parents' rights, Corinne was asking, when did that start? I believe December-ish. It's fairly recent, but during this past school year, at least. All right. So again, IE, so independent, which means it is somebody independent of the district. In the vast majority of school districts, there is not a music therapist who is an employee. For Infinity Music Therapy Services, we are contractors with many districts, but we hold our own regulations for our practice, and they can work with us as long as we abide by federal and state law. But we are independent contractors, which means we can provide an IEE. When you request an IEE, and if they say no to it, it is potentially a denial of FAPE. So FAPE, again, free and appropriate public education, which means that if they deny it, they have to start due process. So you put in a request for an IEE, that can be for any evaluation that either the school has not provided or an evaluation you disagree with. So I did like IEEs for speech therapy evaluations for my son. The school district has one of two responses and one of two responses that they can give only. And the first is, yes, we will provide the IEE. Who would you like to provide it? And we will pay for it. The second answer is no, we won't provide it, and we're starting due process. And in many cases, the burden of proof is on the district to prove the child doesn't require that evaluation. Now, I will say, if your child is meeting all of their goals and objectives, they're accessing, you're always seeing mastery, and you've got the work samples to show that they're making their gains, then they probably have rationale to deny the service. Okay. But if you're seeing that they're not like it's satisfactory, always and beyond, or limited progress, or you have a child who's only talking when music is present, but they're not doing music therapy, you may have grounds to ask for a music therapy eligibility evaluation. So IEEs are requested in writing largely. They do not need to be requested at PPT, and this is a big misconception. And I'm going to actually show you what that IEE request looks like. So when districts respond to a request for an IEE, they have to respond without, quote, unnecessary delay, which is nice and loosey-goosey. There is nothing in the state or federal guidelines that say how long a school has to respond to a request. But typically this is meant to mean 2 school weeks. And so I would stay on top of them if you do put forth an IEE request and ask them when they will have an answer. If they give you one of these answers we'll talk about later, essentially they're saying no, and I will explain to you next steps. So here's a sample IEE. So dear Mr. Smith, this is going to be addressed to your case manager. We are requesting an independent educational evaluation at the public's expense for our child. We are requesting that they receive a music therapy eligibility assessment, a SEMTAP, by a board certified music therapist to evaluate their response to music therapy and potential impacts on the areas of concern. You may choose to include information about the child's response to music or reference IEP. So sometimes you'll see like in the PLAF, so present level of academic achievement and functional performance, on the new CTFSN IEPs, you'll see like concerns and strengths above each one of your goals. Sometimes you'll see in your IEPs like something about the child responding to music. You can pull that information out. And then you want to state in there who you'd like to provide the IEE. So I put my information in there, and then I would CC the teacher, the principal, maybe your director of special education, whoever you think would be, who's been involved in your child's case.
Jonah, hold on. Rosa, you can hear? I want to know if anyone else is having a problem to hearing the presentation.
About that. Let's see. Okay. So here. Okay. Perfect.
Okay.
All right. So I'm not sure what's going on. Maybe you can just directly message Rosa. Maybe for them to leave and come back in. It'll reset their audio.
Yeah, I think it's maybe better. Let me send a message.
All right. So if you put forth an IEE request, here are some of the school responses that you might receive. I will be honest, a lot of times school districts are going to say things and not because they're trying to violate your child's rights. They honest to God just don't know. So we look at music therapy. Music therapy started in the Midwest. So Connecticut was one of the last states to kind of receive services. And to put things in perspective, we got our first music therapy degree program last year. And music therapy has like, we're almost, 100 years in, and we just got our first degree program in the state. So we only have about 125 music therapists in the state. And so a lot of districts are just unaware that it is covered under federal and state guidelines. So they might say one of these things and not realize that what they're saying is a violation of the law. So the first thing is we will look into the evaluation and get back to you. This is fine as long as they are responding without unnecessary delay. Sometimes they're going to go call the State Department of Special Education and find out if it's actually covered. If you do get that response, you always can reach out to me. There are some resources I can send them that actually pulls out right from the Federal Register of where music therapy is included. The second one is we will add your child into general music and add more music exposure to their day and see if they are responsive enough to warrant an evaluation. This is an example of RTI, response to intervention. They can do RTI. However, RTI cannot be used to deny or put off a response to a request for an evaluation. So your response can be, that sounds fabulous. However, are you denying my request for an evaluation? It's as simple as that. I know I say it's as simple as that, as we've all like probably been at the table, asked for things, and we're like, why is this so hard? We're pulling your hair out. Like I'm asking for basic needs for my child. But they have to respond without unnecessary delay, and they can't try to take data on their own. So here's the other big thing. When we look at general music is working on things like reading notation, understanding music history. It's the equivalent of saying, my child's got speech and language needs. Let's put them in debate and see how they do. Or my child needs physical therapy. They're having trouble walking. Not a problem. We'll add them to gym and see how they do. Like it's not physical therapy. That's not speech therapy. They're working on a different set of skills. And for whatever reason, music is often looked at as this separate thing. And it's not. We are music therapists. We are equipped to use music to work on non-music goals. Okay. The third thing I will hear is we don't offer that here. Great. That's why we have contractors in the state of Connecticut. So any district in Connecticut can contract out with a private music therapist. And for Infinity Music Therapy Services, we serve districts throughout the entire state of Connecticut. So it's not like there's not therapists that can get to your child's district. The fourth thing I will often hear is music therapy is only for elementary school. This is false. We think about music in our society. I'm going to guarantee all of us on this call listen to music at some part of our day. It's not that music is only for early childhood enrichment. And the great thing about music therapy is it can grow with a student. So yes, I will use Taylor Swift music to work on speech and language or emotional literacy skills or whatever else have you. It's not like we only can use Lori Berkner and the Wiggles or, whatever, Sesame Street for our itty bitties. So we do have students we serve all the way up through age 22 in the schools. And like I said, our oldest on our caseload has been around 103. And finally, we'll have our music teacher run the evaluation. It's a Class D felony in the state of Connecticut for someone to say they are rendering music therapy if they are not a board certified and licensed music therapist. So if they would like to encounter a Class D felony, which I'm sure they don't want to, they're not able to do that. It has to be a music therapist who's rendering the evaluation. That is our specialization, and it is a specialization within healthcare. All right. So step number 2, you've gotten your request for the IEE approved. You're going to choose your evaluator. So typically, if you do any kind of IEE request, the district is going to provide you a list of what is required from that evaluator. In almost 20 years that I've been practicing, I've yet to see a district that has one listed for music therapists. They'll have them listed out for like speech pathologists and BCBAs and all kinds of other stuff, but music therapists get left off. So where I'd like for you to watch, if you choose not to work with like a business like mine, that you want to see that they are MTBC, so music therapist board certified. In the state of Connecticut, they have to be licensed. And I would strongly advise that they have experience with IEPs and more specifically, your child's educational diagnosis. This is also the only time that a district can legally bring up money during special education services. A request for an IEE has to be a, quote, normal and customary rate. So it has to fit within what is traditional. I know I asked for an IE for my son one time, and the evaluator I wanted like $5,000. And the normal customary rate for what I was looking for was between $1,200 and $1,500. And so the district kicked it out immediately. And I only could agree with them because $5,000 compared to $1,500 is a really big difference when every other provider in the state of Connecticut was charging that normal and customary rate. All right, so step 3. Let's say you get it approved. You're going to sign consents for the evaluation as soon as possible, and you're also going to sign a consent to release the records. So let's say you happen to be at PPT and they're like, okay, we will provide this evaluation. You're going to ask for that information right then and there. And here is why, okay? The evaluation that we provide to determine eligibility is very lengthy. If I am just providing it on my own and there are no hiccups from the school district, it's probably going to be a 2.5 to 3 month process in order to do it properly. And you'll see why when I go over the steps. I will tell you the vast majority of times from the time a parent requests an IEE to the time that we go to PPT to discuss the findings, it is almost an entire school year. And it is largely because the district waits to respond to every single step of this evaluation. So the more that you can do to be proactive to get out some of the things that are the barriers, like these consents, the faster that the evaluation can get conducted. All right. So step 4, we've got it set up now. We're going to provide the special education music therapy assessment process, or SEMTAP. So the first step is what's called the educational review. So some practices across the country, they're going to ask for about 1 year of records, and that's as far as they're going to go. At Infinity Music Therapy Services, we ask for the last 3 years of records because it's going to give us our transition from birth to 3 or a triennial. And that gives us information about where the child was and where they are now, and hopefully evaluations that have been conducted in the meantime, so we're not reinventing the wheel. So we will look through all that information, and that helps guide us in how we structure interviews with the educational team. So the way this works is many times you'll see music therapists, they will send out a questionnaire. Like if you've done any kind of evaluations from the school district, I'm going to guess that you've gotten a questionnaire to check off some little boxes on, and if you've done an ADOS before, it's like, how severe is this, that, and the other? We don't do that at Infinity. At Infinity, I sit down and I meet with every single member of the team. And that way I don't have professionals behind the scenes talking to each other on how to answer these questions. I want the information about the child's performance as it is now and where they're planning to go with them. And I also ask questions related to how they're currently using music, if at all. That's going to give me insight and what I'm going to look for in the non-music observation and look for in the music therapy session. So Althea's wrote, how and when can you request music therapy at this time when you just had a PPT? You do not need to have a PPT to request an IEE. You can literally send them that letter and request a music therapy evaluation. You're not going to request music therapy because they don't have to provide you any service without an evaluation. You're going to ask for a music therapy eligibility evaluation, an IEE. And again, you're just going to do that in writing. All right, so that non-music observation, typically we observe a child in 1 to 2 environments. For Infinity, we tape record those findings, and here's why. I typically have at least 2, if not 3 to 4 members of my staff review those tapes in order to take the data on them. That way, I'm not taking data at the same time as observing because I'm going to miss something. I want concrete data on what is actually happening. So in the non-music observation, this might be in like speech therapy, it might be in the general education classroom. It really depends upon where the child's needs are and the reason for the referral. So when we are looking and taking this data, I'm looking at a variety of skill areas, and they are not allowed to use music at all. I just did a couple of these, and they went to go pull out maracas because that's how they got the kids motivated to do some of their schoolwork. No maracas. Gotta put them away. There's no music-based apps. There is no songs. It has to be core education without any of the music in it. Now, when we look at the music therapy session, I am going to take as many of the non-music components and put it into music therapy. So one time I did an evaluation for a high school student, and they are working on some life skills with grocery shopping, combining that with speech and language. And so they had a shopping list that they were using. They had some food with price tags on it. So I used all of those things and set it to music. If the child's in a particular chair, I want that same chair. If they're using flashcards, I get the flashcards. And again, we tape record that session, so 3 to 4 members of my staff can sit down and take the data off of that. Now we're going to compare the data. So we're looking at maybe, like for one of my students I just evaluated, we looked at the number of times they eloped during non-music observation in the music therapy session. We also looked at the number of spontaneous verbal utterances, as well as the length of those, and the number of times there was an active refusal, such as like screaming or swiping materials off of a table. So we compare and contrast all of that information, and we compile a report of the findings, which is all of the information from above. So the last couple of reports I've done have been between 17 to 25 pages. So very lengthy evaluation, lots of good information. And then we're going to present this at PPT. So what you want to do for step 5, you want to make sure that you have the recommendations and findings in advance of the PPT. This goes for any evaluation, whether that's school-based, IE, I don't care what it is. You should have that to you minimum 5 days before, because heaven knows none of us can sit at the table, read that report, process it, digest it, spit out questions for it, and really advocate for our children. It's not possible. So I always tell my district that I want it by this date, and if not, then I will cancel that PPT and move it. So you're going to look at the recommendations in advance of the PPT. Now, the findings of this evaluation are going to generate one of 3 things. First, the student requires music therapy. The second could be the student benefits from services, but it is currently accessing the curriculum. For a finding like this, you may or may not see music therapy get added to the IEP, simply because maybe they're responding the same level of speech that they would in music. And so is the service really required? And I've seen districts go either way with this one. And finally, the student does not require music therapy, meaning that they're not responsive. And to be honest, I've never seen a child hit that, simply because there's a reason why the school or the parent is requesting music therapy. So Carrie asked, far-fetched, but is there a way for music therapy to address school refusal avoidance at the middle school level? Absolutely. It's called songwriting and lyric analysis to process the reasons for refusal. Music therapy can be delivered home-based. So I do have some students that are homebound receiving music therapy services, but if they're unable to access the curriculum and they are responsive to music, the findings can potentially indicate that music therapy is an avenue to get them back into the school day. I will be honest, it's not a typical reason why I see, oh great, my little mouse disappeared, why I get referrals, but it is a thing that happens. All right, I'm just gonna click out, there we go, but click out on the screen until my mouse comes back, then close this. The other thing I will say about any PPT is my advice to any parent with a child with a disability is to tape record all of your PPTs. Connecticut is a one-party consent state as long as the meetings are in person. However, I would not just advise blindly recording your PPT. You can notify your district in advance, I will be recording this PPT. And by law, they have to let you. They probably will tape record themselves, but this has a couple of benefits. And I always word it to the district, we talk about a lot of things in this meeting and it's a lot to digest. And I would rather go back and listen to the tape than misinterpret what was said later on. So I always tape record my meetings. I will tell you, I hit a time where they tried cutting all of my son's speech therapy services, and I had it on tape that I'd already approved them. This past school year, they literally tried saying in the IEP that they had denied access to all of his ESY services, and I had on tape that they were approving all of them. So I was able to send them a snippet back of the tape, and they were able to say, oh, whoops, we wrote our notes wrong, and flop it around. So I would advise tape recording every single meeting that you attend for PPTs. All right. So if services are approved, and I will be honest with you as well, just because the findings show that they require music therapy does not mean the district is going to add it like this. I have one that is fighting tooth and nail over it. If that happens, there are resources I can send your way. I have never seen a district that has fought tooth and nail to deny an evaluation where the child requires a service and not eventually provide the service. I'm not going to say that it won't eventually happen where someone's just really digging in their heels, but it's not a guarantee they will provide it. However, if music therapy is provided on the IEP, it can be individual, group music therapy, consultation services, which can be ongoing or one time, push in or pull out services, or any combination of the above. So like I had a student one time who received individual music therapy 1 hour a week, 30 minutes of group music therapy per week. And then we consulted with her band director to get her included into the band environment in middle school. Now, this is different than an educational enrichment program. So we have many districts that provide music therapy, and your child might be in one of those where they're providing music therapy as an enrichment curriculum. And enrichment curriculums are great because it means more kids get the service. However, if it's not on your child's IEP, the district at any point in time can just cut it. I had a district where they were getting 14 and a half hours a week, and every child in the school that received special education services was getting an hour and a half of music therapy a week. The administration changed, and one of the first things they did was cut the entire program. If it's on the IEP, they're not able to just cut it so willy-nilly. There has to be a process to it versus an educational enrichment program where they can. So IDEA states, as soon as possible following the development of the IEP, special education and related services are made available to the child in accordance with the child's IEP. IDEA also requires the school system ensure that each regular education teacher, special education teacher, related services provider, and any other service provider who's responsible for the IEP's implementation have access to the IEP, are informed of their specific responsibilities, and are informed of specific accommodations, modifications, and supports to be provided to the child. So within that too, let's say you do have music therapy on your IEP for your child, and you get your invitation to your next PPT and you see that they are not included, they are supposed to be included to that meeting. You are not supposed to have any member of your team exempt unless they have, one, provided a written report of where the child has grown and what they've been doing, and two, you have granted permission for them not to be there. There's actually a consent form from the state. Oftentimes we go to PPT and they go, oh, whoops, so-and-so is not going to be here. Do you mind if they're not here? And they put us on the spot. You have the right to say no. And finally, IDEA does not give a specific amount of time before finishing development of the IEP and beginning services described in the IEP. It just says as soon as possible following the development of the IEP and implemented without undue delay. So stay on top of what has been approved on your child's plan. You have every right to file a state complaint if they are not providing services within a reasonable amount of time. So in a nutshell, services are going to be listed on the related services grid if it is an IEP service. And the music therapist is typically the service provider and the implementer. You'll see those two different columns. You want a music therapist to be in both. Goals should be identified to be targeted. If it's just on the notes page that music therapy is going to be provided, that's not good enough. Music therapists should be assigned goals and objectives. In some districts, that's going to be the same. Like you'll see speech pathologists and music therapists sharing goals and objectives. And in other districts, music therapists will provide their own goals and objectives. Music therapy should not be rendered by a non-MTBC, so again, music therapist board certified. But consultation can result in carryover. And we have many students where they have music therapy consults, so the speech pathologist can incorporate music, for example. And music therapists, like I said, should attend all IEP meetings. And if it's not on the IEP, it can be eliminated. So you want to make sure that it is properly in there. So someone out there, so quick to drop band from his schedule, I can imagine how quick they would to be dismissed MT. So this is the thing, our today's society, what do we cut first? We cut the arts. And the arts actually have more research on how we're building connections with peers, emotional regulation, cognitive skills, and the research goes on. And they can dismiss music therapy all they want for an IEE request. However, they only have two responses. One, we're going to provide it and we're going to pay for it. Who would you like for us to do the evaluation with? Or two, we're starting due process. They can't just dismiss you and put you off. If they do, it'd be a state complaint, which are not as scary as they all sound if you haven't done one. I did one and ended up getting my son compensatory math tutoring as well as his fluency services. All right. So other funding options as you are exploring this, private pay is an option. Music therapy tends to be more cost effective than other traditional therapies. HSA and FSA cards are potential reimbursement sources. Infinity does offer somewhat of a modified sliding scale, which means we don't turn people away because they don't do exactly what we recommend. We offer 30, 45, 60-minute sessions weekly, bi-weekly, and monthly. The DDS Family Support Grant can fund music therapy, and their funding just reopened on July 1st. We have many children that are receiving funding for music therapy under that, that funding source. The Friends of Autistic People Foundation, they have a grant where they'll pay up to 50% of music therapy for individuals on the spectrum. Infinity does have a pay-as-you-are-able program that's run intermittently during the year, and I will tell you it's underutilized. Right now, we are supposed to have a free community music group run by our music job shadow interns. Beginning on Thursdays, we would take up to, I think it's 10 or 12 kids, and we have had nobody sign up. Before COVID, we'd always get those programs filled, and also during the school year, we have music therapy interns that will run private sessions for free or close to free, and it just is an underutilized resource. I have had people that have gotten together and they've custom built their own group. And then one of the things that people often miss, if you are doing itemized deductions on your tax return for any medical healthcare things you're doing, you can claim any of those non-reimbursed fees. So anything the insurance companies don't pick up, that includes your co-pays, co-insurance, private pay, and then the mileage to get to and from any of those locations, you can claim that on your taxes. And many people forget to do that. Oops, let's see. Corinne wrote, my daughter has a budget. She is 17. DDS denied. Music therapy said the school should cover it. The school laughed. I applied for a grant from DDS and it was denied. Wow, that's fantastic. Okay, so the school laughed at you. Again, IEE requests. A lot of times we go into PPT and we say we want music therapy and they can be like, no, we're not doing it. There's not an evaluation to show that they require it. You have to put forth the IEE request and force them to respond in one of those two ways. And if they don't, then you have a state complaint. For DDS, if she has a DDS budget through the IP, then you're going to go above their head, because what they oftentimes the case managers are unaware that DDS can cover music therapy under a prior authorization. They'll do a cap of $71.02 an hour, or they might, like I had a client, they moved around some of their budgetary line. But DDS can cover music therapy. Oftentimes the case managers are just completely unaware. And regardless of whether they think that the school should be covering it, school services, educational services are different than medical services. And DDS is helping provide medical and therapeutic services, not necessarily educational services. They are not one and the same. It's the same as like if we're doing private pay music therapy and educational music therapy, there are different laws that we are working under and different things that we can provide. So just a little bit about my background as well, because I know I've been talking a lot. I have been involved with DCF since I was 12. It was the 90s. So I worked through the DCF system on getting music therapy approved. I have worked birth to 3 and special education services for almost 20 years. I used to run group homes for adults with developmental disabilities. I actually was a live-in house manager on site 87 hours a week. So I learned the DDS side of things. I have worked with DEMIS for survivors of domestic violence, alcohol and drug abuse, and you just kind of name it. I grew up in a nursing home as well from the time I was age 4. So I've had to work that whole side of things. So there is definitely options. It's just, if we look at a lot of our DDS providers and school providers, they're just a little lost on what they should do. So I know we're a couple minutes past. This is my contact information. I do provide free consultation. So if you're interested in that, you shoot me an email. I'll send you a link. That's also my work cell, so you can call or text that line. We do in-home and school facility and telehealth services throughout Connecticut. So you're not going to ask me a question that I probably haven't heard before or don't know where to go get the resource. So I know I've answered a bunch of questions as we've been going. Does anybody else have questions, comments, complaints, thoughts that I can answer, whether that be through text or, just unmuting yourself and asking?